صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله الذي جعلنا من المتمسكين بولاية سيدي ومولاي علي بن أبي طالب. والحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. In the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful, we ask Allah to again send His greatest blessings and praise upon Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. We praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for all the blessings He has given us, and the greatest blessing being that He allowed us to be of the ones who remain steadfast, dedicated, and loyal on the path of our master after the Prophet, the commander of the faithful, the prince of the believers, the protector of the Prophet and his message, Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. We praise Allah for this blessing and every blessing, for without Allah we would have nothing. Assalamu alaikum, my dear respected brothers, my dear respected sisters, wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Before I begin, I'd also like to take permission again from my teacher and my mentor, Sayyid Haidar. It's not easy, by the way, being up here when Sayyid Haidar is here. And he's just shaking his head at me. Sorry, Sayyid. But when it comes to the remembrance of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, and this is something Sayyid Haidar mentioned yesterday, which I really took to heart, which is, even if you're a person that's not a person of knowledge, any one of us can make sure that we bring forth that remembrance of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, and ultimately gaining that closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in that pursuit, me not being a person of knowledge or scholarship, but being a servant of the servants of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, so that we can hopefully gain this closeness to the most significant people that ever walked this earth. And one of them being someone who, I don't want to say we oppress, we neglect, I don't want to approach it with that negativity. But I want to say that we have yet to really fulfill a relationship that is a relationship of grace with Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam. You and I have an untapped potential of a relationship with this man who gave everything, even though those who he gave were undeserving. And that goes to the meaning of grace itself. So when we look at Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, I want you to see him as not a prince, a leader, a master, but the prince of grace. Who here loves Lady Fatima alayhi salam? Who here loves Imam Ali alayhi salam? Who here loves Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam? Who here loves the Holy Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi? Who? MashaAllah. Tonight, I want you to fall deeper in love with them through Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam. And hopefully now, from this point where we're standing here in the holy month of Ramadan, I hope and I pray that you remember 3 months from now, in the holy month of Muharram, 3.5 months from now, you remember Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, and you remember how indebted we are to Imam al-Hassan to allow us to commemorate Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam as we do. Because the foundation by which the movement of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, not as people tell us, but the true movement of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, a movement of life, not of death. A movement of grace, not of power. A movement that connects one to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directly through Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. That movement of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, we see it only, we realize it only through the generosity and grace of Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam. And he gave so that you and I can be where we are today. Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam was born in 625 CE, 3 years after the hijrah of Rasulullah, after the Prophet was persecuted by his own people, the people of Quraysh, the people that didn't realize the mercy to mankind and what they had in a man amongst them, the cream of the crop. They didn't realize what they had. They fought him, they persecuted him, and they drove him out. And he would take a new home in what would become called Medina, what was the land of Yathrib. Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam was born 3 years after that hijrah, after that migration. Imam al-Hassan, when he was born to his mother, Lady Fatima, and his father, Imam Ali alayhi salam, when they held him, the Prophet came to their home. And he asked Lady Fatima, his daughter, to hold Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam. And as he held him and smiled, he asked Imam Ali alayhi salam, have you named him yet? What does Imam Ali alayhi salam say? This is why we love Imam Ali. Look at what Imam Ali alayhi salam says. He says, Ya Rasulullah, I did not want to take that step before you. When other people would raise their voice over the voice of the Prophet, when other people would disagree with the Prophet in Revelation, when other people would challenge the Prophet, and so they're praised for that. Imam Ali alayhi salam had the humility and would forever say, I am the servant. I am from the servants of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. He says, in the naming of his own son, his first son, I wouldn't take that step before you, Ya Rasulullah. And you know what Rasulullah says to Imam Ali alayhi salam? And I will not take that step before my Lord. So the Holy Prophet waits for Jibreel to descend and give him the name from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Imam al-Hassan would be named with. And it would be the first person to be named with the name Hassan. That was the first grandson of Rasulullah. He would recite the adhan in his right ear, recite the iqamah in his left ear. He would hold him, embrace him, love him. Imam al-Hassan would grow up in the embrace of the Holy Prophet. They say that Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam would memorize the revelation, the verses that were coming to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wa from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directly, and he would share it with his family and others. At the age of 3, at the age of 4, Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam was one sharing the revelation. Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam was sharing the hadith, the narrations of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wa Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, as I said, whoever here is a lover of Rasulullah, of Lady Fatima, of Imam Ali, of Imam al-Hussein, look how we're going to connect to that love with Imam al-Hassan. Imam al-Hassan, at a young age, a young boy, he would stay up all night, in nights like these, watching and listening to the prayers of his mother Fatima alayhi salam. And when he would listen to her prayers, he would hear her pray for everyone. And when she would finish her prayers, he would ask her mother Fatima, I listened to your prayers all night, and I hear you pray for everyone. I don't hear you pray for yourself. Why is that? And with that, the wisdom of Lady Fatima alayhi salam, the Lady of Light, she would say, my son, your neighbor before yourself. Your neighbor before yourself. Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam inherited and was nurtured in the embrace of revelation and the guardianship of that revelation, showing that selflessness and that servant leadership from that young age to the most immaculate individuals that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed the earth with. Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam would continue to grow and would be affirmed through the revelation of the Holy Quran. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would tell us in Surah Ali Imran in verse 61, when the challenge of Mubahala from the Christians of Najran would come forth. The Christians of Najran wanted to challenge the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, challenge his prophethood. What would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tell the Prophet? Tell them to come forth with our sons and your sons, our women and your women, ourselves and yourselves. Who did the Prophet bring forth with the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for our sons and their sons? Our sons were none other than Imam al-Hassan and Imam al-Hussein. So Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam fulfilled half of our sons that divine mandate from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. And who would fulfill our women? None other than one woman that was enough for all of this characteristic, all of this attribute that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had mandated. One woman, his mother, Lady Fatima alayhi salam, the mother of Imam al-Hassan. And anfusana wa anfusakum, ourselves, none other than Imam Ali alayhi salam, the self of Rasulullah. This is the childhood of Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam. This is what he's being raised in. Imam al-Hassan was only 7 years old at the death of Rasulullah. At 7 years old, he would witness other individuals take the caliphate, the successorship that Rasulullah had prescribed and given to Imam Ali alayhi salam as a divine mandate from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's a narration that says when the first caliph had ascended to the pulpit, Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam would be walking and would see that man ascend to the pulpit and would ask him a simple question. Why are you sitting in the pulpit of my grandfather? Is there not a pulpit for your father that you can sit in? And Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, to those that took the rights of others, he would show justice and truth in such a beautiful, immaculate way. But even to the elders of the community that perhaps were not doing things the best way, the gentleness that Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam had, him and his younger brother Imam al-Hussein. You all may know the story of the elderly man that didn't do his wudu properly. And Imam al-Hassan and Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam were watching him. Imam al-Hassan had the emotional intelligence to educate, but through humility and respect. So to that elderly man, he would go up to him with his younger brother and say, "Oh Shaykh, can you show us which one of us is doing their wudu better?" And through Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam's emotional intelligence and his example, the elderly man would say, "You actually are doing it better than I, and I need to correct myself." So Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, this would be his childhood. But what would his youth look like, especially after the death of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? The age of 7, Imam al-Hassan would witness not only the death of Rasulullah, but the martyrdom of his mother, Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam. Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam would experience the greatest trauma in seeing that occurrence, the oppression that took place at her door. Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, him and his younger brother Imam al-Hussein would see their mother Fatima alayhi salam lay on the ground after her death, after her soul had departed her body. And I shared this particular thing with you to know the perseverance and the strength of our Imams alayhim salam that were nurtured in an environment that had trial, tribulation, and trauma. But the strength that comes out of it and the inspiration that you and I have, that no matter what we go through, we have to be individuals that do good. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Holy Quran, in Surah Al-Rahman, verse 60, هَلْ جَزَاءُ الْإِحْسَانِ إِلَّا الْإِحْسَانِ? Is there a reward for goodness? Is the reward for goodness anything but goodness? You see Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam go through all the trials, all the tribulations, but still gave. The first caliphate came 2 years and 3 months. The second caliphate came 10 years. Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam was about the age of 10 until the age of 20. Where during that period of time would be the rise of the Umayyads, with the appointment of the second caliph to Yazid ibn Abi Sufyan, and then after him Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan as the military governors of the new conquered lands of the Byzantines, which was modern day Greater Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, Jordan. And you'd have this going on at what? When Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam was only about 12 years of age. And Imam al-Hassan was with his father in the background, making sure that the religion was protected. Even though their rights were usurped, even though their rights were taken, they were focused on education. They were focused on doing good. They were focused on making sure people had the true connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a connection to the whole Quran. So yes, when people came to Imam Ali alayhi salam and Imam al-Hassan was just a boy, and they asked him, Ya Ali, why don't you come out? And Imam Ali alayhi salam said, I am busy compiling the Quran. That emphasis, though some people looked at it as inaction, but what it really was strategy. What it really was thinking ahead. And Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam witnessed that. So the second caliph came. And then the third caliph came. And Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam was 20 years of age. Until about the age of 32, the third caliphate would take place. And this was where the Umayyads took a whole new level of influence in the Muslim empire. And during this time, you see the strategy of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. And when I say strategy, I want you to look at it this way. Don't be overtaken by the word strategy. I want to make it very practical. Strategy is looking long term. Strategy is seeing what's to come, planning steps ahead. When people had their eyes on dominion, on authority, on money, on wealth, Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam was being raised in the house of Imam Ali alayhi salam, in the shadow of Imam Ali alayhi salam, doing what? Sacrificing his own personal rights in order to protect the rights and lives of others. There's two principles that we see from the works of our scholars. Hafd al-Din wa Hafd al-Dima. If you understand these two principles, you'll understand the whole movement of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. And there's no better example to bring these principles truly at the forefront of our minds, not in the back, at the forefront of our minds, than Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam. Where what? Hafd al-Din, the protection and preservation of the faith. What do I need to do to make sure Islam is protected? What do I need to do to make sure that La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah remains in the hearts and the minds of the people? And the second being Hafd al-Dima, the preservation of literally blood, meaning human life. If you see the movement of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, any step they took in any action whatsoever, for the caliphate, outside of the caliphate, was always emphasizing, how do we make sure people's lives are protected? Today I want you to see something. That with Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, and with our scholars, with our maraja, there's always 1,000 times thinking over what would put people's lives at risk. What would put people's rights at risk. So some people may be quick to mobilize, to take armies. And inshallah I'll share briefly about that in the life and legacy of Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam when the caliphate was under him. How people pushed Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, fight. Push Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, go to battle. Push Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, let's take it back. But Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam would consult with people, would ask them, what do you really want? What's really at stake? And people would call out for preservation. And Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam would make sure that the rights of people and their lives were never put in what? In jeopardy. So during the third caliphate, Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, between the ages of 20 to 32, because the third caliph, Uthman ibn Affan, would rule for 12 years. And I want you to get an idea. When Uthman ibn Affan came into power, one of the first meetings that took place was with the sons of Umayyah, the tribe of Umayyah. And who was present? Not only was Muawiyah present, but Abu Sufyan was present, his father. And in this meeting, Abu Sufyan, they say by this time he was so old, he was also blind. So he didn't see who was in the gathering. So Abu Sufyan, now in the company of whom? The new caliph and their people around them, they were in one of the homes. Abu Sufyan asked, is there anyone strange amongst us? Is anyone gharib, anyone outside of the family? They say, no, uncle, speak freely. So he says, O sons of Umayyah, it is your time. Take the reins of power and do not let go. They saw this as the opportunity for them to rise and take the vengeance that they had been waiting for against the Prophet of Islam, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his family. Because Abu Sufyan, that was the arch enemy of the Holy Prophet. That was the person who, remember we started off with the hijrah of Rasulullah, who was persecuting the Prophet. Sometimes when we look at the battles of Islam, the battle of Badr, the battle of Uhud, the battle of Hunayn, Khaybar, Khandaq, all of these battles, we see them as, oh, people were just attacking Islam from the outside. This was a continued persecution of the early Muslim community of Mecca. They drove them out of Mecca to Medina and then continued to chase them. What we don't understand, what we may not realize, is the battles that we experienced as Muslims in the early Muslim community were just a continuation of persecution. And the Holy Prophet ﷺ, all he was trying to do was grow this community in La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. People continue to go and press on. And who was at the forefront of these battles? Abu Sufyan. Abu Sufyan, decades later, would be sitting with the Caliph and his cousins and say, "O sons of Umayyah, it is your time. Take the reins of power and do not let go." Now look at what Imam Ali alayhi salam, Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein do. During this time, they're still doing what they did for the previous 12 years. These 12 years under Uthman, same as before. They are protecting the faith, educating people. They are at the center of their community. It didn't matter to them. It didn't matter to them. So long as they were doing their absolute best in educating people and keeping them connected to their faith, Imam Ali alayhi salam, what would he say? لَأُسَلِّمَنَّ مَا سَلِمَتْ أُمُورِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. That so long as the rights of the people, so long as the affairs of the people are taken care of, let them take my rights. Let them take my rights. So long as the affairs of the people are taken care of and the oppression and injustice and transgression is only against me personally, so be it. Because the vision of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam was greater than just sitting at the seat of power. You and I, when we think of leadership, my dear brothers and sisters, do we see leadership as whoever is in the seat of authority? Who is the president? Who is the prime minister? Who is the king? Who is the Khalifa? Is that leadership? To Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, they saw leadership as different. They saw leadership as something that was consistent, that no one could take away from them. Yes, they had rights. Yes, the right to the caliphate was theirs, but the caliphate that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave, the caliphate from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that when Imam al-Hassan, Imam al-Hussein, and Imam Ali, their father, when they were engaging with these caliphs, their priority was what? Okay, you took that power, you took that authority. We will continue to be what? Servant leaders and serve the believers. So when Uthman would have 12 years of nepotism, 12 years of corruption, 12 years of the Umayyads rising, people wanted to fight Uthman. People wanted to depose him. People wanted to get rid of him. Rebellions were taking place, and now there was a threat on Uthman's life, and he was besieged in his own home. But Imam Ali alayhi salam would refuse for a rebellion to take place and for vigilantes to take justice into their own hands. Yes, even with an oppressor, even with someone who is corrupt, justice is to be served as the justice of Rasulullah. There was a rule of law with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You can't just take justice into your own hands. So even with the rebels, Imam Ali alayhi salam served as what? Served as a mediator between the caliph, who was rightfully accused of corruption, and Imam Ali would go to him and tell him, the corruption you're doing is moving the people against you. You need to stop it. You need to change. You need to bring forth reform. And Imam Ali alayhi salam at one time would put the rebels at bay, as Uthman promised to bring forth reform, but the reform never came. And when they came so close, the rebels came so close to attacking Uthman and taking his life, at one point history tells us that Imam Ali alayhi salam would send his own sons, Imam al-Hassan, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, to dress in their military gear, in their armor, and go outside of the house of the Khalifa, the house of Uthman, to keep the peace, to keep order, to make sure that there wasn't lawlessness. And subhanAllah, you look at the strategy of Imam Ali alayhi salam and the foresight of Ahlul Bayt, because who would be accused and battles taking place from Jamal to Siffin at Imam Ali alayhi salam, accusing him of being responsible for the killing of Uthman. And the response to that, as history tells us, how could that man, Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, and his family and his supporters be responsible for the killing, the assassination of Uthman, when he would send his own sons to keep the peace and keep law? But they would continue to fight Imam Ali alayhi salam. Even after the people had gathered around Imam Ali alayhi salam after the assassination of Uthman, the third caliph, and push Imam Ali alayhi salam to become the Khalifa. Imam Ali alayhi salam would tell them, I'm better for you as counsel than I am as chief. But they continued to press forward and ask Imam Ali alayhi salam to lead. And Imam Ali alayhi salam would lead. But the justice, they could not bear the justice of Imam Ali alayhi salam. So when Imam Ali alayhi salam would lead, my dear brothers and sisters, he would lead, and Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam would be along his side. And when Imam Ali alayhi salam would move from Medina to Kufa and would fight those who would challenge him in Basra in the battle of Jamal, Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam would be at the front lines in the battle of Jamal to make sure that the believers were protected, that the faith was preserved, and the faithful were honored. In every battle that was Imam Ali alayhi salam being challenged, and Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam was at the forefront of that battle. For 4 years and 10 months, Imam Ali alayhi salam would rule as the caliph, elected by the people themselves. And when Imam Ali alayhi salam was finally assassinated in the masjid of Kufa, in the holy month of Ramadan, in the nights of power, in his prayer, Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam would then become the Khalifa and would lead. I want to paint a picture for you to continue to see the grace of Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam. When he would bury Imam Ali alayhi salam, Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam was in his mid-30s, about 37. He would bury his father. The people would rally around him. And it's said that as soon as he buried his father, people rallied around him to pay him allegiance. And history tells us that everyone in the nation, everyone in the Muslim empire had rallied around Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam with the exception of Sham. Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam would bury his father and would return home. As he was walking home, it's narrated that a man from Sham was visiting Kufa. And he would go up to Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam. I want you to picture this scene. Imagine burying your father. And who was your father? Imam Ali, the commander of the faithful, the brother of the Prophet. He had just buried his father. This man comes up to Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam and says, "Are you Hassan ibn Ali?" He says, "Yes." Wal-'iyadhu billah, he curses the Imam and his father. What is the response of Imam al-Hassan? He says, maybe you're a stranger in these lands. Do you have food to eat? We will feed you. Do you have something to drink? Are you thirsty? We will quench your thirst. Do you have somewhere to rest and sleep? We will provide you a room. Do you have a house to stay in? Do you need shelter? We will open our house for you. Come, my brother, you are our guest. Come, my brother, you are our guest. Can you imagine? Tell me of a leader. Tell me of someone that has that much grace that even for somebody, not who just wishes enmity towards you, but someone who expresses it, curses you. In a nation, in a place where people were systematically cursing the name of Imam Ali alayhi salam, the grace of Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam would embrace them. With that, Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam would go forward for 6-7 months, The people of Sham would continue to rage on against Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam. And when he saw from within his ranks, even his own commander of his army would fall for the tricks and the blackmail and the bribery of Muawiyah, losing 8,000 soldiers just in one decision by one man, Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam would tell his companions, you know I am the first amongst you in battle. His track record was proven. But for him, what he wanted was what? What Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted. What Rasulullah wanted. What Imam Ali alayhi salam wanted. What Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam wanted. Which was for La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah to be protected. And for people, for their lives to be saved. Imam al-Hassan would never put anyone's life at stake. So when people called for preservation, he said, your lives will be preserved. So Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam architected. He architected a peace treaty that would change his army from being one that would fail in war, military disaster, to being a publicly recognized as political opposition to Muawiyah. And that Muawiyah would only come to power, no matter what you hear today about Muawiyah. Know that Muawiyah is summed up in the following. He is indebted to Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam for anything that he did, any position that he had. The Umayyads only were able to come to power through the peace treaty of Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, which did what? Expose them for their oppression and their injustice. All of the conditions, the 5 conditions of Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam in the peace treaty. Look at the genius of Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam at a time where people did not know who the Umayyads really were because they were limited to Sham. For 18 years, Muawiyah would rule. And in those 18 years, he would expose himself. He would not, as the first condition said, you are to rule according to the book of God and the sunnah of Rasulullah and the tradition of the righteous caliphs. They wouldn't rule. He wouldn't rule on that basis. He would not honor that. He would not give the khilafah to anyone other than Imam al-Hassan or Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. The systematic cursing of the name of Imam Ali alayhi salam would continue in Friday prayers, would continue on the pulpits of the nation. People continue to be persecuted. The treasury of Kufa was taken when Muawiyah would come into Kufa. He would say, I did not come to rule over you. I could not come to set prayer and fasting and zakat and all of these deeds. I came to rule over you, and the treaty that I have with Al-Hassan and all of its conditions are under my 2 feet. One thing I want you to pay attention to, and inshallah I'll wrap up here, is the last condition of the peace treaty of Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, which said that all people of the nation, regardless whether they are Arab or non-Arab, black or white, whatever tribe they came from, all people of the nation shall be protected and their rights honored. All people. Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam wanted to make sure that people were protected and honored. So today, when you look back and you see Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam in his movement towards Karbala after the 18 years of Muawiyah ruling, where even his companions, after the death of Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, 8 years in, because Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam had 10 years under Muawiyah, under the peace treaty. 8 years in, after the death of Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, people came to Imam al-Hussein and said, let's take back Iraq. Let's fight. Let's lead a revolution. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam said, I'm on what my brother was on. So long as Muawiyah is alive, sheathe your swords. So when the final condition was violated, Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, the peace treaty that they were honoring, when the final condition was violated by Muawiyah, by appointing his son Yazid, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, regardless of what you believed in him, theologically, your aqeedah, whether you were a follower of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam or not, it was irrelevant at that time, because what? The Umayyads only had what they had because of the peace treaty with Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam. So when we see the movement of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, and when Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam said, I'm not going to seek power, I'm going only for islah, for the reform of the nation of my grandfather, you see it within that body of Islam. And you see Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam's movement to Karbala on the basis of his treaty that he honored from his brother Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam. And the last thing I'll leave you with, my dear brothers and sisters, in the birth of Imam al-Hassan is the death of Imam al-Hassan. On his deathbed, the end of his life, after even escaping the attack on him, and 8 years later being poisoned by his own wife, on his deathbed, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam would be near him, next to him, crying over him. And it's said that Imam al-Hassan would tell Imam al-Hussein, my brother, hold your tears, because there will be no day like your day, Ya Abu Abdullah. I want you, inshallah, from this blessed night, my dear brothers and sisters, and inshallah, as we continue in the holy month of Ramadan, and 3 months from now, as we commemorate Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, I hope you remember this night, in which we connect our love and our passion for Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam to our beloved Imam al-Hassan. And inshallah, we continue to educate ourselves and learn more about his life, because there's so much more to learn, inshallah. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to honor us with the memory of Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, to protect us, to heal our sick, to answer our prayers, and all this night, as well as the rest of the nights of the holy month of Ramadan, to continue to be blessed for you and your families, inshallah. هذا والحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة والتسليم على نبينا محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد.